What is Battlecry? What's it all about? And if you cry in battle, is that still a battle cry or just a breakdown? Either way, it's a free action. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this video chapter, I'm taking a look at the newly released Battlecry rulebook for Pathfinder 2e and going over what important stuff the book actually adds to the system itself. I'll be starting with a quick overview of what's in the book itself, then I'll be talking about the important bits, the stuff that actually affects the system itself, and the stuff that players and GMs will care most about. Then I'll throw in my personal opinion on Battlecry and how I think it fits into the wonderful PF2E system we all love so much. Obviously, the book is newly released, so some stuff in here may need long-term eyes on it for us to see how impactful it is, so take some of what I say about Battlecry with a pinch of salt. And as ever, if you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, or taking a look at my Patreon, especially if you want your name added to the end of my videos. Right, let's get in there. Battlecry for music. Okay, quick overview of what this book is and what's in there. Battlecry is Paizo's PF2E war book. It picks up after the God of War Gorham's death, where conflicts are popping up everywhere, inviting the PCs to join in and get all Battlecry-y. It's filled with a bunch of stuff, from items to siege weapons and classes to dedications, and even new GM tools to help run large-scale warfare. Suffice to say, there's a lot of stuff in here, obviously all war-themed, and I really think it's an excellent addition from Paizo and well worth your time, though I'll get to my personal thoughts about the book more towards the end. So what actual gameplay stuff's in this thing? Well, the first chapter goes over the new Jotunborn Ancestry, then has some new backgrounds, and the biggest part of the book, 2 new classes, complete with dedications, the Commander and Guardian. Chapter 2 goes over some new dedications and some new class archetypes, then goes into the new follower rules and throws in some new spells and rituals. Chapter 3 is all about siege weapons, battle vehicles, and an armory section where we have new equipment, magic armor, shields, weapons, ammo, held items, etc. Chapter 4 is the GM section. It has the skirmish warfare subsystem, which is the large-scale battle stuff with PCs still involved, and a garrison of ready-made enemy troops, an explanation on how to make your own, and it finishes off with advice for running war campaigns and a quick lore rundown on global conflicts. With the content of the book out of the way, let's jump into one of my lovely lists, where I'll be talking about the parts of the book that stood out to me that I think people will be most interested in, that probably affect the system more so than anything else in there. I'll also be mentioning some minor criticism, so prepare yourself for that, and if it helps you can bite onto a leather strap or whatever so you don't punch your screen each time I complain. So the first important part of the book. The Jotunborn Ancestry is the first true large ancestry for PF2E. Well, the first non-bestial type large ancestry for PF2E, which I think makes them cooler. They're rare in rarity, you have 10 HP of course, and there's a heritage that actually makes them medium sized if you want a non-large version. But I love the art for these guys. Their neck muscles alone could lift a truck. The lore for these guys is kind of cool. They're stewards that the gods slapped together from rebel titan remnants, and they've been told to look over Golarion from a plane called the Fray. They're loyal, patient nomads with cool looking glowing, yes they actually glow, Ivlar weavings. Ivlar are silk spiders, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They get some pretty awesome feats, and I'll just showcase some of my favourites. At level 1, they can repair an item for a free action and no check, though it only brings it to 1 above its broken threshold. At 5th level, they can get into a stance that gives non-reach two-handed weapons reach. At 9th, they can throw a willing ally so long as they have a hand free within 20 to 30 feet, and at 13th, they can teleport for 2 actions to anywhere within your speed. Lastly, at 17th, they can grow to huge, get another version of toughness added to them, and get 10-foot reach. Crazy stuff. I really like this ancestry, and it gives me at least a dozen ideas for new characters, which I think is probably the best compliment some can say about a new ancestry in a system like this. Also, the skin is bluish, and I like that color for some strange, bizarre, unknowable reason. The only thing I dislike is the fact that they're large, even though you can make them normal sized. I just generally think that a lot of Paizo adventure paths are designed for medium characters and lower, and it can be a little bit tricky to get large characters to fit into dungeons, etc. Not impossible, but a little annoying. Next up, the biggest part of the book that I imagine everyone wants to look at. The Commander is a class that is really cool and I really like. I'm not going to spend years going into these new classes, as I guess we really need to see them in action for a while to be able to judge, but I do absolutely adore both of them, but more specifically the Commander itself. So the Commander is an 8 HP common class with intelligence as its primary attribute. It's trained in all armor and martial weapons, is an expert in perception and reflex plus will, and trained in fortitude, and starts with training in society and warfare lore +2 intelligence. Commanders are what they sound like. They give commands called tactics, and you start with 5 in your folio. Each day during your daily prep, you select 3 tactics of the tactics in your folio to use, and you do drills, which has you select 2+ your intelligence modifier of allies that can respond to your tactics called squad mates, and you yourself count as one of these, though not towards the max amount. You can swap out all of your tactics with a 10-minute drill, kind of like refocusing, I guess, with those in your folio. Some tactics have long cooldowns that you can swap out once you've used, which I really like. A lot of tactics have you spend actions that then allow your allies to do stuff outside of their turn, during yours usually, and it usually costs a reaction, so it's good that commanders get a thing called drilled reactions that, after using a tactic, allows you to give back 1 reaction to a squad mate. Commanders also have a banner that has an aura, which makes sense, and some tactics only work in relation to said aura. Sometimes your allies need to be in it or need to end a tactic inside it, etc., though sometimes you don't need it at all. While inside the 30-foot aura of your banner, allies also get a +1 status bonus to will saves and DCs against fear effects. You can attach your banner to a weapon, shield, or even just have it on your backpack, and some abilities let you place the banner, and if it gets destroyed, all of your squad mates become frightened 1, which is just hilarious to me. Oh, and commanders can also shield block and get a level 1 class feat, being a marshal, of course. Initially, you can only select from a list of mobility and offensive tactics, but at level 7, you can start choosing expert tactics, and at 15th, you can start selecting master tactics. Lastly, at level 19, you get to pick from the legendary tactics list. I'm going to go over some of the tactics that stood out to me that I think sound really cool. A reload does what it sounds like. For 1 action, you can get all of your squad mates to reload. That's it. No other requirement. Amazing. Tactical takedown, 2 actions, and you signal up to 2 squad mates in your aura. They can stride half their speed as a reaction, and if they both end that movement adjacent to an ally, the enemy has to make a reflex save against your class DC or fall prone. I love it. End it. 2 actions, and has the incapacitation trait. You signal your squad mates within your banner's aura, and they can step as a free action directly towards a hostile creature. If a squad mate ends this movement within 10 feet of an enemy, the enemy has to make a will save against your class DC or become fleeing for 1 round, or frightened 2 plus fleeing on a crit fail. It does have some hefty requirements, but it's great otherwise. As for expert tactics, slip and sizzle sounds amazing. You signal 2 squad mates in the aura, 1 must be adjacent to an enemy and the other must be a spellcast of some sort. The first squaddie attempts to trip as a reaction, and if they're successful, the second can cast a 2-action range spell at the baddie you just tripped. I love this. Being able to cast a spell outside of your turn is awesome. I think you're meant to use cantrips for it, because if you don't, you become slowed 1, but still, it's just a really cool tactic. In Master Tactics, the one that stood out to me was Roaring Charge. It's 2 actions with a 10-minute cooldown, and everyone within the aura can stride twice as a reaction towards any enemy they can see, and once the movement is completed, the enemy has to make a will save against your class DC with basically the same effects as the Fear spell. I love this so much. Lastly, Legendary Tactics. I like healing abilities, so Sanguine Revitalization sounded great to me. For 2 actions, once per day, everyone within your aura that has a piercing or slashing weapon can stride up to half their speed as a free action, and if they end that movement within reach of the designated target, they can attack as a reaction. Once that's done, if the target took damage, it has to make a fortitude save or take 10 points as persistent damage, and they take a circumstance penalty to their strikes equal to how many people gave it a whack, up to a maximum of -4, and then your squad mates within 20 feet of the enemy, I imagine, get healed for 10d6 HP. I love me some healing, especially when you get to murder someone at the same time. Lest we forget feats, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here as that's a whole video chapter on its own, but I liked Officers and Medical Training, which gives you battle medicine and lets you do medicine checks with intelligence. Guiding Shot gives the next ally a +1 or +2 on a crit on their next strike, so long as you hit said enemy with a ranged strike. You can get Shielded Recovery at 4th that lets you use battle medicine even when wielding a shield, and gives a +1 circumstance bonus to AC when you battle medicine an ally that uses a shield. You can get Reactive Strike at level 6, and at level 8 you can use a 1-action ability every 10 minutes to heal heal everyone within the aura for 4d6 that scales as you level, called Rallying Banner, and can even be used outside of combat, though it only heals for half. I'll leave that there because there's a lot more I want to say, but can't have this video be an hour long. Suffice to say, I love this class with all my heart. I really didn't think I would like it all that much, as being a battlefield commander isn't really my style, but there's some really cool tactics and feats you can do with this class that make it really interesting to me, and I'll definitely be giving it a shot at some point. And I honestly feel like this class really opens up the movement-based tactical side of PF2E, which we didn't have a great deal of until around the remaster, and it has so many cool tactics that it really shows you how much more Paizo can do with this system. And the commander is just entirely unique. There's nothing like the commander in PF2E, and it blows my mind that even after 25 plus classes, we're still getting unique ideas from Paizo. So great job, guys, you really nailed it here. My only two critiques, and these are very minor. The first is that I don't know how well balanced some of these tactics are with certain builds or certain ability combinations. For example, a level 9 Liturgist Animus gets the Dancing Invocation ability that lets them sustain a spell for free when they step. And while I have looked at a few sustain spells and they seem to only work on subsequent rounds, and conversely summons only get their actions when sustained at the start of your turn, I wonder if there's some spells out there that might not have this stipulation and could be open to abuse. It is early days, so I could be completely wrong here, plus erratas do exist, but I just wanted to throw this one out there in case there's a crazy combo that could potentially be a bit busted balance-wise. The second thing is that this class is really advanced and really requires you group coordinate outside of their turns, which some GMs may not like, as isn't realistic for the PCs to be talking and making these tactical decisions outside their turn. I guess you could roleplay it, as that's what the daily drills are all about. Still, commanders could potentially have really slow turns, as there's some very specific tactics here that require, well, tactics. And while I personally love that, some players might hate how long it could potentially take each time a commander's turn comes up, because there's so many things to consider now. For example, a typical turn for a commander could be to plant a banner, which gives temp HP to allies so long as they're in the aura. Then the commander could get everyone to step, which means all your allies now need to decide where to step to. Then the commander might attack or something, and then they get to decide who gets a reaction back. It's just kind of a lot in one turn. Other classes have complexity also, but not all other classes get abilities that effectively make all their allies do things outside of their turn. And while I personally have no issue with this, it could make for rather long and complex turns. Right, on to the next big addition to PF2E with Battlecry. The Guardian is a 12 HP common class with strength as its main attribute. It's trained in all armor and martial weapons, is expert in will and fortitude saves, and trained in reflex, and starts with training in athletics. The playtest for Battlecry had some teething issues with Guardian, all of which seem to be fixed here, hence the point of playtests. Other companies would do well to copy what Paizo does here. The Guardian starts with physical damage resistance when wearing medium or heavy armor equal to 1 plus half their level, and can rest in medium or heavy armor. They get shield block, a level 1 class feat, and two really cool abilities, Taunt and Intercept Attack. With Taunt, as a single action, you pick someone within 30 feet, and if they don't target you with a hostile action or DC, they take a -1 circumstance penalty and become off guard until the start of the next turn. They stay taunted until the start of your next turn, and you can only taunt one enemy at once. This even works on mindless creatures, by the way. And Intercept Attack is a reaction when an ally within 10 feet takes physical damage. Basically, you take the damage instead and you apply your own resistances to the attack, and you can step towards the enemy if need be. If this attack comes from a taunted enemy within 15 feet, you can even stride towards them so long as you end the movement adjacent to your ally. So Guardians are really good at guarding, of course. And now that they have 12 HP, they are rather tanky too. At level 7, they get an additional reaction just for Guardian feats and abilities, so they get even better at this stuff, and you don't have to wait so long for that ability. And their armor proficiency scales a little bit better than Champion and Monk, meaning that you get +2 AC at level 5 rather than 7, and another +2 at level 11 rather than 13. Of course, most of their feats are defensive ones, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over them, but the level 1 long distance taunt makes your taunt 120 feet, and you can take defensive advance here, which is the same as the Champion one that allows you to move, raise a shield, and then strike for 2 actions. At level 2, you can grab Taunting Strike that lets you hit and taunt at the same time. Reactive Strike is here at level 6 again, and they get get a bunch of other defensive-based feats, but suffice to say, the Guardian is exactly what it says on the tin, and I love that we have a super-duper tank class that isn't forced to worship a deity or be a monk. My only criticism is that while intercept attack is cool, I still personally prefer Champion's Reaction because you reduce all types of damage from level 1 and get an additional thing you can do like Strike. But yeah, I get it, it's different. You don't want all the classes to feel exactly the same, and you can get feats to make it better like Energy Interceptor. So overall, I quite like this class, and not as much as I like the Commander, but maybe that's just a personal thing. I actually usually really like tanky classes, and this one is good, but I don't know, Commander just seems cooler right now. Although combining Guardian with a Champion dedication would be pretty amazeballs. Do people still say that? Probably not. And neither the Commander or the Guardian has subclasses, which is pretty cool. I actually prefer classes without subclasses. For some reason, it makes them seem more open-ended to me, but anyway. And next on my list of important things from Battlecry. Right, archetypes and dedications. Of course, we have a Commander and Guardian here, which are exactly what you'd expect. Commander gets a banner, a tactic, and you get more tactics and feats as you level, and Guardian gets medium armor proficiency and heavy armor if you already had medium, and they get taunt, plus the usual feat selections as you level. The Alduri Duelist is kind of like a swashbuckler slash duelist with a specific sword type. A Crossbow Infiltrator is good for specific crossbow users. The level 4 Crescent Cross training comes with a 2-action strike that hits 3 enemies with no map, which is really good for low level. Field Propagandist is kind of what it sounds like. They spread rumors and stuff about factions, but get some cool combat abilities like making enemies stupefied and making a weakness or making a resistance for an ally. Definitely a weird but interesting dedication. Gorilla gets some bonuses to using blowguns or slings, increasing the damage die. Blowgun actually gets a deadly D4, which is pretty cute. Plus they get some poison stuff, a frightened feat when an enemy gets killed, which kind of makes sense, and also Death Blow is crazy because it's insta-death. Iridian Choirmaster is a weird name, but it makes a bond with someone and you work together to weaken enemies and attack at the same time, etc. Kind of similar to Sniping Duo, but not really. Necrologist gets an Undead Horde with no spell slots from what I can see. It could be done every 10 minutes. It's not a swarm by default or a troop and can't actually share space with other creatures as it has a reach around it to attack, though it is huge. It's really cool if you want to summon a horde of undead regularly, something I've had players asked me if they can do in the past, and well, now you can. And then there's 2 class archetypes, Munitions Master for Inventor and War Mage for Wizard. The former is a mortar using Inventor, which is what it sounds like. It gives you a 3-action, 1 aim, 1 load, 1 fire, area of effect and mortar attack with innovations to make the attack do extra stuff, etc., which is a really fun idea for a class archetype. Of course, this is going to be entirely ranged based. War Mage is a wizard with training in light and medium armor, has shield block, martial weapons training, but doesn't have Arcane Bond or Arcane Thesis, and they can swap out a spell for Sure Strike. They get some cool feat options like the Intimidating Spell Shape that has enemies that fail a save be frightened 1. They get bonuses to Bespell Strikes, like increased weapon damage die, etc. Shielding Formation, which is a rank 4 focus spell, looks really fun. For 2 actions, you create a 30-foot emanation that's sustained up to a minute that gives allies that end their turn within the emanation a +1 circumstance bonus to AC. And if they take damage while under the effect, they can, as a free action, get 10 resistance to all damage, though they lose the AC bonus and become immune to the effects for 10 minutes. A really fun focus spell, though it doesn't look like it heightens, which is a bit strange. There's also some mount-based feats for Cavalier and Champion, and Sorcerer gets a new bloodline, Aesir, which is kind of like a damage-based Divine Sorcerer, and I really like it. A Barbed Spear for a focus spell at rank 1 has you doing a spell attack roll, and it does 1d8, not a lot, but it makes them clumsy 1 unless they remove the spear, which I like. Let Not the Fallen Rest looks really cool. It's a rank 5 focus spell that's 3 actions and restores 4d10 HP to everyone within 30 feet. It specifically says that this works on allies with dying 2 or less. Does that mean it works on people with no dying value? Dying 0 is less than 2, right? Oh, and you get to stand as a free action too, and it doesn't provoke reactions. Lovely. The Summoner, gets a new Eidolon, Swarm. It's kind of what it sounds like and actually is a swarm when it's in its dispersed form, though you can make it into a condensed non-swarm form also that's medium-sized. Thaumaturge gets a new implement, Shield. The shield can never break and stays at 1 HP and can still be raised even at this point, though it only gives +1 AC when at 1 HP, and when you exploit vulnerability, you can raise the shield for free. At 7th level, it can be used to increase your saving throws against spells and even shield block spells too. At 9th, the shield regains HP when you succeed at a strike against a target with exploit vulnerability on them equal to half your level, which is just really good. And if the shield's HP is already full, the hardness increases by your charisma modifier until the start of your next turn, which is just really strong, and I really love that. Makes for some interesting shieldy tanky builds. I have no real issue with any of these archetypes or dedications for what I could tell. They look pretty interesting, they look fun, and they're certainly options that I would consider should I ever get a chance to play. Not that I actually do get a chance, because I am a forever GM. Sucks to be me. Where's that tiny violin? There's another dedication, but to explain it, we need to talk about the next section first. To sum up followers relatively quickly, they're kind of like animal companions that are generally humanoids without special abilities like humans, etc. Though unlike the non-mature animal companions, they get 1 action per round even if you don't direct them. They get abilities depending on their type, like Medic can heal with Battle Medicine, Sharpshooter can do a 2-action aim with a +2 attack bonus, Shield Bearer raises shield, etc. And they get exploration activities too, though these are more limited. You need to pick Scout as a follower to be able to use a follower that actually has Scout. Each follower gets advancements too, similar to mature animal companion and the savage nimble thing, though they seem a bit more detailed and quite different for each type of follower and as require certain feats, which I'll get to. But of course, I did mention that there is another dedication, and that dedication is Captain. Captain is, from what I can tell, the only way you can actually access these followers. So at level 2, you got to grab the dedication and you immediately gain a follower, and of course you'll be taking feats as you level up to increase their capabilities, like I just mentioned, including making them more powerful with the advancement system. As for my critiques, the only really thing that I have is that having another person in your party that isn't your character can be a little bit confusing. There's a little sidebar that talks about this in the book itself and how it will sort of work. It could just be a little bit confusing, a little bit extra faff, especially if you have multiple followers. It's just one of those little things. Where does the follower go when they're not with you and you have another follower out? I don't know, it's just a little bit strange, but still, I do love this system. I'd probably want to make an inventor that takes the Captain dedication, creates a construct that's humanoid. Obviously, they wouldn't actually be a construct, but as in mechanics-wise, but roleplay-wise, I like the idea of having a little robotic companion that's not the advanced construct companion thing. There's a lot of stuff you could do with this. I quite like it, and I applaud Paizo for giving us these pretty in-depth and interesting companions. I always love companions, honestly, so this is just more of that. Okay, on to the penultimate part of Battlecry. So, spells and items. I'm just going to gloss over this section, as obviously there's a lot of stuff in here, and usually time will tell how good or bad these items are. Battle magic. There's quite a few spells here and rituals, and as I said, I'll just gloss over them. Though I will mention Helpful Reload as a rank 2 spell that's a reaction that basically you just reload your ally's weapon, which I think is just really awesome. Most of the spells here are, of course, war-related ones, so you're going to get a lot of battle magic and stuff, which is never a bad thing, considering the majority of Pathfinder 2nd edition is spent in combat, or at least my campaigns are. Then there's a whole section on siege weapons and battle vehicles. There's some pretty cool stuff in here. Again, I don't know how common these scenarios are going to come up. Funnily enough, in the campaigns I'm running, they actually are going to come up. But yeah, there's some cool siege weapons here, including the organ gun, which I think is just really awesome. And when we get to the battle vehicle section, there's a siege dragon, which is actually a pretend dragon. I mean, it's level 19, but still, I love the idea of scaring the crap out of people with this fake flying dragon thing. Plus, there is a flying fortress at level 20, which is literally what it sounds like. It's a flying fortress. It's kind of utterly bonkers. I love having stuff like that in systems like this. There's also a flying submersible, so if you like flying things that can go underwater, you'll like this, I guess. As for equipment, there's some reprinted weapons here and a few new ones like the Jotunborn Maul Spade. There's some interesting magic armor listed. Most are level 8+, but there's a few low-level ones here too. Reactive Mail looks fun. Once per hour as a reaction, when a creature within 15 feet does a manipulate action, you get to shoot an iron spike at them for 2d8 piercing damage. Fun. There's some cool magic shields like the Siege Shield, which can be put on the ground to make cover, and the War Mage's Buckler, which allows you to throw the shield shield and then use it as a focal point for your magic. The Bivouac Taj becomes a tent, which is kind of fun. Then there's some magic weapons like the Dazzling Shortbow that can dazzle enemies, of course. The Mage Slayer is interesting because it just does more damage against arcane casters. I just wish you could get a version that does more damage against summoners. The Radiant Victory makes a shining light after murderizing someone, and it gives everyone a +1 status bonus to attack rolls within 30 feet of the light. There's some new magic ammo types and new siege ammo types, which I'll skip over because most of it is siege ammo. And then we move on to the whetstones section. These are held in one hand with your weapon hand in the other. You can do it with two-handed weapons, but you need to regrip afterwards. So a lot of them last more than just one attack. Some last up to a minute, so it's kind of like a talisman with extra faff that lasts longer. They have stuff like learning weaknesses or resistances on a strike, damage type altering, extra damage against certain creature traits, etc. They're kind of fun, kind of interesting. Then we have banners, of course. They're not just for commanders. Anyone can have a banner. You can affix them to a weapon or shield or backpack, etc. You can only be affected by one banner at once, though, and it's the higher level one or the highest loyalty for the person that's wielding it. They have effects in an aura around them. Some are damaging, some give buffs to allies. One of them gives off light, the Dawnfire. The Vandal's banner ignores hardness for an object, and the Stalwart's banner gives temporary HP and Fortitude DC and Reflex DC to effects that move or knock you prone. They're generally pretty cool. Of course, there's a bunch of held items and worn items, which again, I'm not going to go into in this video because it's already more than long enough, but you can never have enough cool loot to give to your party or for them to buy. And moving on to the last section of the book itself. The GM tools section is, of course, for GMs only, more or less. There's some interesting stuff in here, and I think Paizo have generally done a good job on what they've attempted here. So there's a whole subsystem on skirmish warfare, which allows for squad scale combat where PCs are still involved with the combat itself. You're in the squad and you get 5 actions, 3 for you and 2 for the squad, or the other way around. You move together but target separately. It's a pretty cool idea for certain campaigns like defending towns and the like, and allows for large scale combat while still keeping PCs involved, which is really cool. There's a section on enemy troops with a big list of them and how to make them, and then we have the actual GM toolkit section on running a whole campaign around a war. It goes over what war actually means in play, gives you tones and genres, etc. for what type of war you're going to run, prompts for missions, objectives, defeats, etc., and how to track the whole thing with victory points, and that you can use in skirmish warfare section when you want full-scale battle. And it mentions where PCs sit in the hierarchy, like being in command. How to pace downtime, reminds you to set clear goals instead of always fighting to 0 HP. Lastly, we have a section called the War Gazetteer, which goes over the war flashpoints on Golarion, so GMs can drop PCs into live conflicts if they want. Also, players can just simply have a background from one of these battlegrounds. Kind of hard to criticize this particular section. I'd have to actually do significant testing to see if it's all right, but it looked fine to me. And I think that's pretty much all the big things that you need to know about Battlecry. Of course, there's more than likely some things I missed in here, as the book clocks in at just over 220 pages. But generally, I'm actually quite happy with everything that Paizo has done here in this book. I think it's got a good deal of variety, and of course, 2 new classes is always a good thing. I absolutely love the new Ancestry. I'm generally just very happy with almost everything in here. My critiques are few and far between, and I think this book is a great example of Paizo doing cool stuff right. It's always good to know that Paizo listens to playtests, and they've actually taken on board a lot of people's criticisms with the Commander and Guardian, more specifically the Guardian. Generally, I'm just quite impressed with this book, and it's well worth your time. I'd like to add that Paizo continually shows how much they can do with this system. I honestly thought that with all the content we have so far, like, where else can we go with it? But this book has a completely unique class, the Commander. Lots of items, things like followers that utterly destroy my fear that PF2E was potentially running out of things it could explore. I genuinely think this is one of the best books Paizo's ever released for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's packed with good content for practically any campaign, and it is just generally a really good release. I'd say that it's only missing some non-troop based enemies, maybe a few more feats for the classes, but otherwise it's just an amazing release with lots of cool stuff in here, including some great GM tools for those wanting to run big war things, which is just a really excellent idea. I think that's going to do it for this video chapter. Thank you for watching. I really hope it helped you understand all the important information within this new rulebook. If you found this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member or a patron if you'd like to see your name at the end of this video. Like the following archivists and members: Max Magnus 20019, Aussie Smith, Shard, Sirakia, and patron and archivist Clash. Thank thanks again for all your continued support, guys. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominimi Nomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.